place mesmerizing, a dark is quiet playing satirical.
Welcome back to Geeks and Grounds, a monthly game club and weekly podcast where we play games and brew good conversation together. I'm your host, Jenny Wyndham.
And I'm Joel Thomas.
And
Are we objects of power yet? Have we ascended?
I feel like we must be getting, we're at least, what is it, altered items?
Okay.
At the very least.
We need to be like people of power. We need to be pops.
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 Let's pop, everybody. Oh, how are you doing, Joel?
It's been a fantastic week for me. I'm vibing on Control, reminding myself why I enjoyed it so much. And I'm pumped to get to talk about it today.
Yay. Yeah, it's been a rough week for me, not gonna lie. Folks in the Discord know about my internet troubles. Work is busy. There's a lot of stuff going on, but I am very excited to just have this moment to chill and talk with you. I also had coffee and I drank it already, and it was my third cup. So I was like, I'm not going to pour a new cup because 3 cups and we're not even like, we're just over halfway through the day. Probably shouldn't get more caffeine in my system. I don't think I have, I don't seem to feel like I get affected by caffeine, but I don't want to push it. I feel like I'm not going to test that boundary for myself.
It's dangerous business walking out your front door and working from a coffee shop. And for me, the most dangerous game is having so much coffee that I have to pee like every 15 minutes. So I totally get it.
I know. And I've been at the cafe for the last 2 days because of my internet troubles. And I think I've honestly quadrupled my caffeine intake just for the sole purpose of feeling a little bit guilty that I'm taking up a space the entire day while I'm there. And so I'm constantly reordering coffee or a pastry, which has honestly been wonderful. And the folks there are amazing. And it's a neighborhood cafe. We all know each other, so they're very kind about it. But, I'm I want to support local businesses. Pay for my Wi-Fi, essentially. But yeah,
get down on some croissants.
Oh my gosh. They have these sticky cardamom orange buns.
Ooh.
Orange cardamom sticky buns. I really reordered those adjectives. But they're incredible. If you ever get a chance, we should go, actually.
Okay,
I think you would appreciate. They also have probably one of the best chocolate chip cookies in Portland, I would say. And they make them fresh twice a day.
Well, if I wasn't currently getting down with a sickness, I was going to actually text you to be like, oh, can I come hang out and see you while you're at the coffee shop? But not in the cards this week, unfortunately.
Next time.
Next time your internet goes down, we'll make it happen.
Yes. Honestly, it was really nice because I rarely leave the house during the day. I work from home and it is wonderful. I would not trade it for the world, but I am definitely one of those people where I will hyper focus into work and all of a sudden it's 9 p.m. And so while it was very annoying not having the internet and it caused a lot of rescheduling, including this podcast, I did appreciate being forced to go walk to the cafe and enjoy a little bit of fresh air and more social time during the day. So I'm going to try and make it a habit at least once a week. Just walk down there and go.
I love that. I've got a couple of local coffee shops on the street I live on, and I've started a new gig. Maybe I'll have fewer meetings. Maybe I can do some afternoons, just crushing some work at a coffee shop. That sounds lovely.
Yes. Oh my gosh. I feel like we did a couple times do coffee shop work sessions, but then your other job had so many more meetings.
That was the problem.
Got a little rough. Yeah.
We'll see. Hopefully we can be more work oriented and less meeting oriented, and then I can work while we meet, and that's going to be totally different and better.
Yeah, and then less work oriented and more Geeks and Grounds oriented.
Game changer.
There we go.
Incredible.
For folks who are joining for the first time, or if you are a Geeks and Grounds just regular patron of this digital cafe we've created here, welcome. We are playing the game Control for this month, the month of January, which took me a second. We are halfway through January, which is boggling my mind. But we're just about halfway through the game. So later on during the podcast, we're going to go through the section that we played this week. Every week we go in depth, talk about our reactions to that section, theories we may have, and what we think of the game so far. And before we go, we always like to make a pit stop at the Pastry Case, which is our grab bag of topics, news, things that we've been up to, and stuff in the industry that we've been paying attention to. Admittedly, I haven't been paying attention to anything except the 2 games I'm going to be releasing in the next 2 months. So we don't have any industry news today, but
I did see
yeah.
a really interesting kind of think piece talking about
Mhm.
the misaligned investment in hyperrealism in video games. Have you seen this at all?
I saw it. Yes. I know a couple people who were, I guess, pinged to like add comments, like were interviewed for the piece. I have not actually looked at it. I have my own opinions on what I think it holds.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, what was it? Is this the New York Times piece that you were referencing?
I don't remember the source for it. I'll see if I can
Yeah.
find it and throw a link into the chat for us so we can post it later. But
Mhm.
it's kind of exactly what you would expect, that like video game studios dump a lot of money, especially big studios, into hyper realism. But when you look at the games that tend to do well, they're a lot more stylized, like a la Zelda, for example, would be like a great big budget game that's comparative. The thing that struck me as I was kind of like considering this was
Mhm.
that while hyper realism is not something that I am always drawn to, sometimes I like it. I do think it does a good job of kind of pushing the graphics arena forward in video games. And, that has a diminishing return. Like eventually you'll get to the moment where it's like, okay, well, this is so realistic. I can't really tell the difference between reality and the game, which,
Mhm.
okay, but I guess that means we're good, right? Like, let's now that we've been able to replicate real life, let's get into the stylizations, and like maybe there's more interesting ways we can approach that because we have the realism side quest unlocked or something.
Mhm.
So I mean, it was exactly what you'd expect, but it was just like an interesting thing that like I have not seen a large scale article talking about the investment side of that. And
Mm.
with as much as we end up discussing how big budget studios invest their dollars and how that impacts the whole ecosystem of games, it's good that we're having the conversation or seeing the conversation being had, maybe.
Yeah. Did the article talk about like the use of AI and realism and graphics? Because I know that is something that is much more like it's coming up more often.
Mm,
And even in pitches, I'm not as involved in taking pitches anymore. But even when I was a year ago, there were already studios pitching hyper realistic graphics through the use of AI, which is it's a whole sort of separate conversation almost, because there's like fidelity with graphics cards and sort of the traditional means that we've been using to generate graphics, and
mm.
then like there's this mass AI that we also have been talking about. I'm curious, did the article go into that?
I don't remember because it's been a couple weeks since I read it, so I'll have to
Yeah.
scan through and see. But I mean, the anyone who is doing anything with AI at this point, hopefully, listeners, the economics of it do not make sense as the world currently stands, and if you set that next to the real world implications of things like an entire city being on fire, like the most populated
Mhm.
city in America being on fire, maybe in addition to the the lack of like positive economic contribution, we could set that next to the negative cultural, the negative environmental, uh,
Mhm.
the negative, employment factors, and say, hey, maybe this isn't good.
Yeah.
What if?
Yeah. No, I'd be really curious to read that. I think one of my gut reactions when seeing the headline was I don't know, I was a little bit guarded and pessimistic about the angle of the article.
Mm,
I think I think we should look at sort of the industry's fascination with hyperrealism. I think there is definitely something there that we should address, or maybe explore more deeply.
mhm.
But also, I'm very curious at the article's exploration of like investments in the CEOs and the people at the top of the companies who are doing this mismanagement of funds. Um, and seeing like, are we diverting attention to something that isn't really the core of the problem, or what are we really trying to explore here? So I will admit, I saw the headline and I got very like, interesting, skeptical. What is the deal here? And I do think there's probably an argument and there is valid exploration of that topic. But my question was, why aren't we doing something about the CEOs first?
Well, yeah, I like if anything, like when we have these types of conversations, it doesn't even matter the industry. Like I work in education technology, and it's a similar thing where it's like somehow we talk about products as though the people who are driving a lot of the big picture strategic decisions don't exist. It's like this invisible hand. And it's like, no, like for most products, someone is setting this big picture strategy, and then everything else, all the other decisions kind of fold out of that. So if the big wig is saying like, Final Fantasy VII has to be more realistic, every decision that we make after that comes from that big picture strategy. And like, those are the decisions that those people make. And so you talk about like the amount we invest in those decision makers. You talk about how disconnected those decision makers often are from your typical user, your typical market. And you end up with decisions that don't lead to good experiences for people. And also in many cases are not profitable for the business. But I have a lot of thoughts on this.
Yeah. No, but I also haven't read the article. So, would love the link and we can put it in the newsletter. And if you all have comments or additional questions or things that you'd like to share your thoughts on this topic or really anything, I'll just promote it throughout the show. We've got our voicemail. The link will be in the newsletter. It's also on the website that you can just leave a voicemail and we'll include it in the podcast if you'd like. Yeah. So what have you been playing and what have you been up to besides Control?
I haven't really been playing anything outside of Control, but there are a couple things I've been getting into over the last week. The first is Sakamoto Days, just dropped on Netflix. It's one of those a hitman. It's like a la John Wick. A hitman has retired and become a family man, and now his former gang is coming to try and disrupt his life and take him out.
I'm looking at him and he is so adorable.
It's funny. The animation and action is astounding. Only one episode out so far, but based on the first episode, absolutely would recommend. There have been a few good new anime this season. I'll pull them down and talk about them more next week, but this is one that I watched this week that I was like, episode 1, fire. Absolutely intrigued for the rest of this season.
This is my kind of, I love that kind of contrast, like soft, sweet looking elderly man who is somehow this hardened, like, I don't know, assassin, or what did you say he was? Like
he was a hitman, I think, something like that. Yeah.
So I think that's really fun. It reminds me that kind of dichotomy reminds me of do you know the anime where the Yakuza is the house husband?
Yeah.
Oh gosh, the name is eluding me right now.
It's something like that, isn't it? Like,
yeah. Oh my gosh, it's gonna drive me up a wall.
The Way of the House Husband.
Thank you. The Way of the House Husband. I love when there's that kind of play between sort of the emotional tones and sort of the feelings there. So yeah, this looks almost like the opposite, where instead of the hardened person going into like a soft life, it's like wanting a soft life but going back into the hard life. So it's really cool.
Yeah, that's it exactly. So I got into that, and also today finished Heavenly Tyrants, which is the follow-up to Iron Widow. This book, if you're looking to like feel any degree of hope about what it looks like to, in a fantastical world, revolt against capitalism, but also deal with very real consequences of rebellion, it is fantastic. And the author is hyper aware of kind of what's fantastical versus what's realistic. There are like
Mm-hmm.
there's like really well done disclaimers at the beginning and end about like the elements of this that are fantastical, and it's like the real change is going to come from like community organization and things like that. So it's like, yeah, like there's a
Oh,
bit of
that's
a like
amazing.
fantasy thing happening here for us to be like, oh yeah, within a year, look at how this world is maybe going to change when all the
Mm.
people rise up or what have you. But it turns out when people rise up and the leaders have like giant anime mechs, that's a very different world than our world. So I
Do
absolutely love this
we not
book.
have mechs?
Uh,
Where are
this
our
is
giant anime mechs?
this is the real question.
Yeah.
But could not recommend this book more highly. Loved the first book. If you read the first one and enjoyed it, you'll absolutely enjoy the second one. Iron Widow is the name of the first book. I'll get you some links on that as well. But yeah, finish it today. Also, really interesting, like relational, like polydynamics and like new types of love triangles. So like the romance is a really important element of these stories, and would just highly recommend. And then because it is popular and a friend let me borrow it, I'm reading Sarah J. Maas's Throne of Glass. So I just got started on that. I've read one other book from them before, and it wasn't necessarily my cup of tea, but they said that this one is much better and a better starting point for people who are trying to get into it. So we'll see. We'll report back.
Yeah, I have had a couple friends recommend me Throne of Glass, and Heavenly Tyrant is a book I need to pick up. I've been meaning to go to the bookshop, and I just have not had the time. But I want to. I loved Iron Widow so much, and I have a friend who's reading Heavenly Tyrant right now. You just finished it. It's like it's time. I feel now that I've done the Sanderson, Sanderverse, which I'll talk about in a second. I'm still going back through it. It's my comfort read. But I do want to read Heavenly Tyrant soon.
Awesome. Yeah. So what have you been getting into?
Um, so speaking of Sanderson, just because it's like again a comfort read, and also I'm trying to refresh a little bit because I haven't reread this in a while. I restarted the Mistborn trilogy, so
Nice.
I just finished Mistborn last night. No internet meant I was didn't have a ton of media I could do. So I read a book, which was great. It wasn't even my ebook too. It was like a real book. So that felt extra good.
So good.
Yeah, I know. What real book? And so I'll probably continue and just finish the first arc of the Mistborn sort of franchise. There's a second arc, which is like more Western themed. I will
Which you
eventually read
love.
it.
You're a huge fan of.
Oh my gosh. Westerns are, it's a struggle. I've tried to read that second Mistborn arc. I've lost track of how many times, but it's just something about it. They're like, this is a train ride and we're going to do a hold up. Just, I don't know. But I'm going to
I did a
try.
mental reframe as I was in the middle of that book based on your
Yeah.
recommendation, actually, because I
Ooh.
hate Westerns. I'm not interested
Yes.
in them at all. And I audiobooked the first of that second trilogy.
Mhm.
And when I reframed it mentally as like Sherlock Holmes instead of Western,
Oh,
and like this guy's kind of a genius at kind of his thing,
right.
it actually made a big difference for me. I was like, oh, I'm reading this like I'm like as though I'm like reading John Watson's journals about Sherlock Holmes. Like that made a big difference for me
Mm.
because the opening scene is very much like old Western shootout, and I was like,
Is.
it simply cannot be this. I won't make it.
Right? Oh my gosh. Okay, actually that's a good shout. Maybe that's what I should do cuz I will have to for me, I don't have to, but I want to read it eventually because I know there's going to be a third arc to the Mistborn universe, and
I did not know that.
yeah, I think he said or at least his initial plan, I don't know if anything's changed. He writes far too much. But the original plan was to have sort of 3 arcs of 3 for Mistborn. And so in that we're seeing the world progress through the ages of their society. So it is cool if you think about it, because the first arc is very fantasy, where it's sort of a world that we've never heard of, and it
Mhm.
just feels very traditional fantasy. I love the concept of bringing that universe into sort of their industrial age, which is what that second arc does. I just, like I said, Western is a very hard genre for me to enjoy, but I love the reframe. The third one, I don't know where he's going to set it. I'd love for it to be present day. I think that would be so cool,
Mm.
or in a version of present day that we would recognize. But yeah, so been getting into that. But again, I've been meaning to get Heavenly Tyrant, just because I need to read something new, and not just go back to comfort reads.
Yeah, makes
With
sense.
watching, I have binge watched all of season 1 of Severance over the weekend. Sam and I watched it. It was amazing. I forgot just how good it was. I love Severance, and it was better than my memory remembered, which is a great feeling.
100%. 100% agree with
Did
this
you
take.
finish it? Because I know you were also rewatching it.
Yep, finished it this last week.
Yeah.
Same, like I started finding like new theories online that like as people have been rewatching it, putting clues together.
Oh
There's like
my
a short
gosh.
story that Apple put on their ebook thing that's like a
What?
follow-up. Someone did a deep dive on the file names and they have like a really interesting theory about waterways. Did you see this?
I did not, but I was starting up a theory about the file names as well. So I definitely want to check that out, because that was something I noticed this time around. Oh my gosh.
What
It's
is
so good.
happening? Everyone watch this game. Or watch this show. We got to get the knowing that we have a lot of lost folks in the chat, knowing that we
Mhm.
got like the Evangelion people, like we need theories and this is a new thing to theorize
Yes.
about. Let's go.
I'm so excited because Geeks and Grounds started officially after season 1 of Severance like fully launched, if I'm remembering
Mhm.
correctly.
Mhm.
And so I haven't had the opportunity with a community of people to enjoy watching the show week by week, and just yelling at each other in the server over being excited. So I'm really, really excited. The show is going to be starting Friday, and it's going to one episode every Friday for the next 3 months. Um, Folks have shared some early like reviews and preview reactions. All have been affirmative so far. A friend of mine, she had the opportunity to do a preview of it. She was really positive on it. She didn't tell me anything. I asked her, I was like, don't tell me anything. Just tell me like general vibes.
Yeah.
What did you leave with? And she's like, I left feeling good. And that made me really
Ah,
excited.
I've been really nervous because of all the production issues they've had. So
Yeah,
like hearing
yeah.
that positive things are coming out is awesome.
Hmm. So very excited. Hopefully you're feeling better if we need a waffle party. I'm very excited for waffle party. We'll eventually, if not this Friday, soon.
Yeah.
Um, and then I started a show, which I think for folks who are fans of like feel good TV, like Ted Lasso, or um, I don't know, even the sort of millennial picks of like a Parks and Rec
Mm.
or things like that. The Good Place, Shrinking or Shrinked. I actually
Shrinking
don't.
the Harrison Ford show.
Yeah,
Shrinking.
with
Yeah.
the other Shrinking. Okay, Shrinking on Apple TV. I started watching it because I was just like, I need something because I'm done binging Severance and I'm on this platform. And while it took a couple episodes to warm up to, it's actually charmed me enough where I am invested in the characters, and I am continuing to watch it. I'm still in season 1. I don't know if they have any other seasons or anything, but it's a story about a man who is a psychologist or a therapist. Sorry, he's a therapist. He's grieving the loss of his wife. And it's about him grieving his wife, but also it's about his daughter who is going through the same thing, albeit like without her dad really being present for her. It's about the practice he works at and the other therapists and some of the things that they're going through. And I would say it's a bit heavier perhaps than like The Good Place. Like the topics themselves are
Mm.
heavier, but it approaches things with the same sort of like hope and sort of good faith in people that is quite nice to watch right now. So especially moving into the second half of January, if you're looking for something about people just trying to be better and do good things for one another, maybe stumbling but still trying, I think Shrinking is a good show to watch if you have Apple TV. I don't know, have you seen it?
So actually, a few people have recommended it to me, but they're people whose opinions I don't often align with. So
Mm-hmm.
knowing that you're really vibing with it is actually just the nudge that I needed. So
Yeah.
I'm in. I think they are midway through season 2 right now. So it's
Okay.
probably a good time to be getting in.
Yeah, it took me a little bit. The first maybe 2 or 3 episodes, I was a little bit uncertain. I don't remember the main character's name, but I'm not the biggest fan of his.
Mm.
Like, he's very hit or miss for me, and more often he's usually a miss in the
Oh,
shows and
interesting.
movies that he's in, or at least that
Yeah.
I can recall. And so in this one, I was a little bit skeptical of it, but it has won me over. So I would recommend giving it a try. Maybe move. I think episodes are only like 28 minutes. They're shorter episodes.
Oh, that's been actually like one of the barriers for me, is I assumed that it was like an hour-long show. If
I
it's
don't think
under
so.
30, that's like
I think they're
awesome.
relatively short episodes. If they're longer, then I must just be I don't know.
Then it's
Must
that
be wrong.
good
Then
that
it's
it's
that good.
like,
Yeah, it's flying by.
yeah.
But yeah, I feel like they're shorter episodes, but I could be wrong. I
No,
actually
I
have no
think you're
idea.
probably right. And Jason Segel, is that the guy's name?
Yes, Jason Segel.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
a huge fan of his, actually. So
Really? Okay, so
all
you
the more
might.
reason I gotta get
Yeah.
in.
I I honestly, I think Harrison Ford honestly has been really fun to watch. I was a little apprehensive because he is so iconic in my head with the characters that he's played. It's
Mm,
very hard for me to watch him in anything else because I see him as like honestly Han Solo
yeah.
and like I see him as Indiana Jones. Um, but he does really well in this, and the daughter is also a really compelling character. I think she's really cool. I love what the actress is doing there. So, yeah, really neat.
Can I ask you, how often does Harrison Ford do his like shaky point with his thumb and his forefinger out? This is like
Is that
my
a
I
Harrison Ford
anytime
signature move?
you will never not notice it now. Whenever you see Harrison Ford and he's like making a
Yeah.
point, you switch the samples or whatever the thing is he's saying. He's got like his pointer finger out with his thumb pointing forward, and he's like
Yeah.
shaking a little bit. And that is like the go-to Harrison Fordism. I can't not see it in anything that he does now.
Really? Okay, I'm gonna have to keep an eye out for that because I have never noticed that before. But yeah, I'm sure now I will not see it. You know what I mean?
It's like the Tom Cruise running meme where it's like
Yes. Oh
he
my
has to be
gosh.
running in every movie. Like that's the Harrison Ford pointing thing for
Oh my
me.
gosh. Awesome. Okay, well, I'll be keeping an eye out for that. But yeah, in terms of playing games, Spirit Swap is launching February 3rd for anyone who wants to support a team of indie developers struggle busing their way through development. I mean, all development struggle bus, but no, we're honestly, I played the game all the way through yesterday, and it was the first time I think I left and I was just like, "Oh my gosh, I feel like instead of having the producer brain, I still had a little bit of the producer brain where it's like, oh my gosh, we have to fix this, and this.
Mhm.
I was able to feel like, okay, if we sent this out, I think I'd be okay. Like
Wow, that's
I think this would
awesome.
be good. So that's been great. But yeah, basically, I wish I could be playing Infinity Nikki. I wish I could be playing Fields of Mystria, Stardew Valley. We've got some folks. There's a thread in Discord now for folks playing Stardew Valley. I wish I could join. And right now I'm just living vicariously through everyone else because all I can do is play Spirit Swap until we launch because we got a test. So yeah, that's what I've been playing besides Control.
Makes a lot of sense. But yeah, hopefully now that you guys are you're rounding some of these final bases, you can get back into the games that you like to explore and have some fun with.
Hopefully. Yeah, I'm excited. I think to pull the curtain back from development a little bit, what's nice is once we send out the code to reviewers and like press, which is going to be happening in the next week-ish, we basically can't like, we'll have some patches and like bugs we'll continue to fix, but we can't do any major changes to the game, at least on that like build branch, because
Hmm.
we don't want to break the game because people have the codes. It's like
Right.
in hand at that point. So what's nice is it sort of forces us to slow down a little bit. And so I think that'll be really, really good for the team. I will be emailing so many people. So a different kind of speed will happen. But yeah, at least hopefully we'll have bandwidth to like enjoy other games a little bit.
Makes sense. And then in the meantime, we have Control to play through and talk about.
Very different vibe than Spirit Swap.
Or
now
is it
that-
the same vibe, just different mechanics?
Very different vibe.
Everyone get in the comments. Get in the comments. Let's do some theorizing. Control, Spirit Swap. What's the
like,
connection?
I feel like they're not opposites, but you know, if there was a game of opposites, I feel like they're pretty far on the spectrum from each other. Before we head into our discussion of Control, just a couple of notes for game releases this week. If you want to pick up something, maybe find a game that's not Control to play of your very own. Hyper Light Breaker, which is sort of the sequel to Hyper Light Drifter, which we played last year, is in early access now. I believe a couple of folks in Discord are playing it. So if you want to find other people, team up a little bit while early access is happening, hop into the Discord, let people know you're playing Hyper Light Breaker because you can team up with folks there. And then there's one other game on, oh, sorry, I should have said it's out now as of recording this podcast, Tuesday the 14th. And that's by developer Heart Machine. And Aloft is coming out on the 15th. And that looks like a really cute, just like relaxing game about sort of soaring through skies. It's like a co-op sandbox survival game. And that's also going to be out in early access. So a lot of good games for if you're into sort of playing with other people, which is kind of cool.
Very fun.
Yeah. So that's it for the pastry case.
So, are you in Control? Are you out of Control? Are you Tokyo drifting right now? Like
Fast and Furious, baby.
Okay.
Yeah.
Excellent. Excellent.
No, this game, I will say this section caused the number one, probably most frustrating moment I think I have had in a game since starting Geeks and Crowns.
Wow.
I was trying to think back. I was like, is there any other moment I have been this stuck and this sort of what to do, this feeling of what to do? And this is probably the number one. So Control, you are number one in my heart.
Wow,
for
that's beautiful.
this reason. No, but I'm still loving the game. It's just really funny because I had a rough start at the beginning of this section, which we'll talk about.
Well, I mean, speaking of Hyper Light Drifter, at least you didn't have to call in your older sibling to come in and beat part of that level for you, which is what I had to do. So
for Control?
no,
Wait,
for
was this-
Hyper Light.
Oh, for
when
Hyper
you-
Light. Oh, yes,
when you
yes,
came
yes.
in and
That's
beat
right.
the first area for me because I couldn't make it through.
Oh my gosh. But yeah, I think other than this first, it was also quite literally the first part of the section that we played this week. So it was like I hadn't gotten into a good flow state. So from the jump, I actually started with this frustration. I was stuck, I'll say I was stuck for about an hour before I'll admit this was also me being stubborn. So yes, if I had been less stubborn and just looked it up earlier, could have saved myself the grief. But I'm not very good at games mechanically. Like I don't fight or control games very well. But I usually am able to figure out puzzles pretty well. And so I was getting frustrated because normally I don't have to look up puzzle solutions. And for this one, I did. And it wasn't even a puzzle.
It's true. And I think, yeah, let's get into it. Because I think like it is like right away in this section of the game. So we played from the Old Boys Club through up until the face of the enemy, right? That was kind of when we stopped. My frustration came right before yours.
Oh,
so
really?
I remember having this exact same problem the first time that I played through. And as soon as I figured it out, I was like, this is exactly what you did last time, Joel. So you get like, you just finished going to the executive wing. You've like kind of cleared some things out.
Yep.
And you're told to essentially head to like the research sector or something along those lines.
Mm-hmm.
And when I looked at my map and I looked at my control points that I could teleport to, I didn't see anything about research anywhere. And there were some areas that are kind of scribbled out. They're black, like you haven't explored there yet. And I was like, oh, I must need to go explore one of these places that I've been to. It's maybe one of these big blacked out sections.
Mm-hmm.
And I bet I spent 30 minutes going around to all of these. The good news is I did a lot of random side quests that I probably would not have done otherwise. But like,
Yeah.
I didn't even make it to the research sector until I had to look up where is the research sector. And it's like, oh, you actually just ride the elevator from the starting point of this argument.
Oh no.
So I didn't even make it to the research sector, but you did. You got to the research sector.
I did. I got to the research sector, and the mission said, head on over to parapsychology. And I was like, cool. You walk out of the elevator and there's a big sign that says like Dr. Darling's office, dimensional research, parapsychology. And the arrow goes down the stairs. And I was like, easy. I'm doing so great at this game. I'm finding my way, flying through. I go and there's a big area that is sort of blocked by the hiss. And I fight a bunch of waves of enemies. I clear them out. I'm like, all right, let's keep searching for parapsychology. I go down some more stairs. There's a hallway. There's a really cool audio section. Loved that. Listen to a song. Honestly, I'm going to go get it on like, what is it, Bandcamp now? I thought it was a great song. I was like, I could go work out to this and lift weights to this. So listen to a good song, walk down another hallway, more waves of enemies popped up because I am continuing to play it on just like the difficulty mode that I have. And I am not seeing parapsychology. And so I'm like, maybe I read the map wrong. I go all the way upstairs. I do find Dr. Darling's office, which has some really cool stuff you learn.
So
we'll
cool.
talk about Dr. Darling because I think this is a fascinating character. But no parapsychology. I walk around this area. I go back to the executive central area. I go back to maintenance and do some side quests just because I'm starting to get frustrated. I'm like, let me just go back and then clear my head and come back again. I come back, fight the waves of enemies again because these are that's the other thing. I'm like, these keep on coming.
I know. And there's no control point there. So like they just keep repopulating. It's so annoying.
It's so frustrating. And so I do this for an hour. I am just fighting waves of enemies, going back and forth, up and down this whole section. There's nothing. The only thing that I can see is this hiss door that seems like it's where I should go, but it's blocked by the hiss, which I thought you couldn't walk into, which you can't because it starts depleting your health if you just try to walk into it. Looking up online, I finally I cave, and I personally I don't mind. Like, I think there's nothing wrong with looking things up online. I just really pride myself on figuring stuff out. I love that part about playing games. And so imagine my surprise when all you have to do is shoot the red hiss boxes in that area, and then the portal opens. The hiss goes away. I asked you before that, I was like, was this tutorialized? Did I miss something big? Tell everyone what you told me, because this is just flabbergasting.
So there is no tutorial for that door, but there is like a side quest area that if you go there first, and I think it's in like the maintenance sector or something like that, it tells you to destroy these red hiss boxes. And it's the only place in the entire game that I have found where it explicitly calls them out and tells you to do this. Yeah. And I think I even did that side quest after I unlocked this red door. So like, no, they don't tutorialize it. There's no like, especially like this is the main quest of the game. Why would you put a tutorial in a side quest?
That's what I'm saying it for me, this was the number one, like it really is the only point thus far, like even through the rest of
Mhm.
today's section, last week's section, it's the only part I've ever been truly stuck, um, and felt very I felt like it was a bit unfair with how, I mean, I normally don't read tutorials, but also I think your game design should be forgiving of that because we
Yeah.
all know there are people who don't read tutorials. I think there's a certain degree of, if they don't read the tutorial, where else can they access the information? And I don't think it should be in a side quest.
There are things they could have done to make it more intuitive. Like
Right.
there's like 3 red hiss boxes that if you shoot them, that's what makes the door kind of open. Like
Mm-hmm.
one of those hiss boxes is right next to the door. What they could have done is like you shoot one hiss box and they pop back up after a certain amount of time, like 30 seconds or something.
Oh, okay.
You could shoot a hiss box and maybe like the door slightly changes color or something to say like there's a
Right.
limited number of these. If you shoot them, you can move forward.
Mm-hmm.
There's not even like from an intuitive perspective, there's nothing to let you know that you can even do this. So yeah,
So yeah,
fully agreed.
number one gripe, personally, I was so, it took me a moment because I figured it out, I did it, and I sort of sat there for a second
Mhm.
wondering, kind of in the moment of, okay, should I keep playing or should I just call it and then start fresh tomorrow? But then I ended up kept playing, and honestly it was fine after that. But I was just,
Well, since
yeah.
we're beginning with gripes, I will begin with my biggest gripe in this game, which I had
Mm-hmm.
totally forgotten about, which is like the re-incursions of hiss that happen and you get like 20
Yeah.
minutes to like go and clear them out again. And
Mm-hmm.
it is not clear at all if you don't do that, like what happens? Like, do they reassert a control point or do people
Yeah.
die? It's like, no, you just have 20 minutes to do this randomly assigned reincursion. And like, if you spend long enough playing, you'll go back and clear the same area out multiple times. That bothers me because I feel like this game is really tidy. Like the story is
Mm-hmm.
compact. Moving through it, I think, is really interesting. And because I don't understand the meaning behind these reincursions,
Mm-hmm.
it's like this. It feels like fluff to me instead of like the game could have been like without this one exception, it would be like a perfectly tidy game for me. But
Yeah.
because we keep getting these, it's like, okay, but why am I getting this? It feels like I'm being punished for taking my time exploring.
Right. Okay. I was wondering about that too, because I went back. I think the first time I noticed or had one pop up, it was sort of a mailing room. They've
Yep.
reinfested the mailing room. Go help the people out, and I did it. And it was so funny to me because you have these agents who are there, who are on your sides. You've got allies. It feels really cool. It's the first time you're fighting with people.
Hmm.
And then after you're done, they don't say anything. They just stand there and just sort of like walk around the area or just don't even walk around. They just stand there. And it felt so unfulfilling. I've actually ignored every single re-emergence that has popped up in favor
Wow.
for just going for the story. Um, unless I think I have accidentally stumbled upon them, in my
Yep.
explorations. And if I stumble upon it, I do it. But I've
Yep.
never intentionally gone to re-clear an area since. And I don't know if this has multiple endings. Maybe I'm setting myself up for the bad ending if so, but I personally have not felt the impetus to go and do those missions at all because I'm more concerned about the story. The
Yeah.
story is interesting enough to me right now that I'm like, if they're just going to reinvade, I'll just clear them out later.
Yep.
It's fine.
Totally get that. And honestly, so first of all, I failed that mission because all the people died. I'm still playing in God mode, so I'm just bopping around having a good old time. But all of my soldiers died in that part of the game. So yeah, they died. I got mission failed, and nothing else happened. But I've been doing all of them, so I've
Mhm.
successfully cleared out all of the things, and still nothing like there's no impact to the game that I can see to this point. So maybe I'll do what you're
Interesting.
doing and just stop pursuing that.
I'm like, y'all have survived this long without me. I'm sure you'll be fine. I'm taking care of like the main stuff.
It doesn't make any logical sense. It's like, oh, I'm protected from this thing. I'm going around clearing spaces out, taking these control points. Why are you sending innocent, non-paranormal humans out to do anything? Stay in the safe areas.
I know.
It's like, I'm the director. I should be able to tell you not to do this. That's how I feel.
I still feel like we're puppet director. I don't know. I feel we just don't, partially because we don't know anything. I think partially because we don't care. My opinion on Jesse's, I think we talked last week about how Jessie sort of gung-ho, like she kind of came in, got the title director and said, fine, okay, I'm in. But it's been interesting because this section of the game, as we went through, I felt a lot more of her reticence where it feels to me now, she only accepted the title because it provided this access to the place that she thinks is really amazing and she wants to be a part of. And she also wants to find Dylan. And so the title is this means to an end, but she doesn't actually care, at least currently, about being a director or what happens to all of these other agents unless they can help her. So I've revised my sort of feeling about what Jesse's motivations are based on this section.
That's fair. And I think, this section raises a lot of questions about the director role and like grooming people for that role. So yeah, I think like that's a really interesting topic to get into. But since you did a lot of exploration in the opening research lab, I got to ask about what I think is the most important side storyline, which is the love affair between Hubert and Carla. The research assistants to Dr. Darling. You can like find their correspondence. Like, I don't know why we're in these videos. Like, we don't do anything. It's just like
It's honestly, I normally I love some lore. And I was apprehensive with this game because I do like reading a lot of lore, but games like Elden Ring, for example, are a harder sell to me because the lore is like 100% in what you collect. For me, it's like on one end of that spectrum.
Yeah.
I would say 1,000 Times Resist is on the other. If we're talking about games that we've all played recently, 1,000 Times Resist, I know a lot of folks in the community have recently played it, love it. And that's a game where you don't collect lore, all of its narrative. It's all within the dialogue. I was really interested to see how Control would feel in the midst of this. And I really love the way that they've done collection and collectibles. Things like this little sort of like love moments or the moments we get between the researchers, the book club.
book club. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, they're so much fun. The videos are hilarious too, because I think of all the promo videos. I mean, even for that company, the company we worked for, where it's like, they tell you, oh, could you sit here and pretend like you're typing in your computer for the promo B-roll?
Yep.
And that's also the vibe I got when I was watching, the researchers as they're, investigating the results or like tapping whatever. So
funny that you say that. I just last night am watching the most recent season of What We Do in the Shadows. And there's a bit where their neighbor wants to get a job. And so they set up a fake train station office to try and like give him an interview for the train station.
Yeah.
And so they hire a bunch of actors and eventually they get busted and they're like, you're not even looking at anything. There's a guy like literally holding a clipboard with a bunch of blank pieces of paper on it. It's absolutely cracks me up. So
yeah. Same
fake
energy.
B-roll thing. Yeah, exactly. Same energy.
Right. Where it's like, I'm sure they do work, but these videos and the promo, it's just, there's a staged element to it that I feel is very funny if you've ever worked in an office and ever done marketing and yeah.
So yeah, let's talk a little bit about like this kind of opening section with the Old Boys Club. Like, you go into the research wing. I don't know. It sounds like you did a lot of exploration. Did you go all the way up the stairs to the ashtray maze?
Yes. Okay. Can we talk about the ashtray maze? I have not figured it out yet. So I spent a lot of time wandering. I feel like there's probably something I haven't collected or a side quest or something, but I walked around that place a lot and it is fascinating and so well done, and I'm really excited to like decrypt the maze. Basically, at the top of this research sector, I walk through what seemed like to be like a metal detector and into what was called the ashtray maze. I think there was a blurb from Trent, and I cannot remember what he said. Do you remember what he does to intro it?
Yeah, generally it's like there are some things that are so top secret they have to be locked away in another dimension. And the ashtray is an object of power that has like essentially a pocket dimension in it. And so there's something there that is so top secret that it can't even be kept in the place we go to later, which is like the holding facility. But like it has to be kept in another dimension.
So cool.
By the way, anytime we get to do these, like you walk down the like the plinth, you go through the ocean motel into new space, like those are my favorite moments in this game.
Yeah, anytime we get to flip a lamp switch, I know something good is gonna happen.
Amen.
Yeah. It's like once the lamp switch is there, like the 3 times the ritual of doing that just makes me super excited, which I love the notes that we've been getting and how they talk about ritual and how that and superstition and how this creates just not creates objects of powers, but creates this ability for us to navigate a lot of the paranormal. It's just really cool stuff. But yeah, the ashtray maze was amazing because right now I haven't solved it yet. All I do is walk through it. As you walk through, the maze essentially evolves as you're moving through it. So you walk towards what you think is a door, and then once you get to it, it sort of shifts into a wall, and a door opens up actually in the wall next to you. And so it's really cool. The sound design that they did in there is amazing.
Yes.
And I don't really know what I will need to do to solve it, but I'm excited. That one was like a bookmark for myself that I made. I was like, all right, we're coming back to this because I think it's going to be good.
It's so like interestingly stylized. Like it feels like you're in like the Shining Hotel or something like that. Like wooden paneled walls, like interesting geometric red carpets. You can't do it yet. So if anyone's like trying, like don't like, you're going to get something that will help you with this eventually. But like, even before you get that thing, it is worth exploring. Like it is a cool thing to experience. I remember because I couldn't remember if you got an item to help with this or not. And so I was trying different techniques. I tried to like turn my camera away and like run backwards to see if that would like let me through.
I tried that as well. Let's see. I think I had gone back, so I can't remember if it was the first or second time, but I had tried like dashing to see if that like changed, sort of like my velocity of movement changed things. I tried going back and forth through doors 3 times to see if that changed things.
Ooh, that's smart. I didn't think about that one. Ooh.
So yeah, I love the ashtray maze. That is unlike the red boxes. That's the kind of puzzle where it's very obviously something to solve, and I'm very excited to figure out how to solve it.
Yeah. So let's get into the story a bit here. Like this opening old boys quest line, like you're trying to get to, who's the character? Not Darling.
Marshall,
yeah, who's like head of security or something or head of operations.
Yeah.
And they went to the research wing. And so you are essentially navigating through this research area, which is where all this paranormal stuff is happening. I really enjoy the clues that you find here. Like you mentioned going to Darling's office. Darling's office is fascinating to me. Yeah. It's like anyone who watched Lost, like the Dharma Initiative videos, it's like this is where those are filmed. And you find a video of him looking haggard, like drunk, rings under his eyes, like looks rough. And like he is telling you that like things are about to break bad. Like exploring the office, like you get those little like ball things that you click and it hits them on the other side. Like everything about it just felt like this feels like a place and time to me. It doesn't feel like a bunch of clutter. It feels like this is a real person's office. So that's how I kind of felt. How did you feel going through that office?
I love going through this office in particular because a lot of the cubicles we've seen have been very set piece so that you can throw stuff around when the waves of enemies come. They don't have a ton of detail. You'll occasionally find files. This felt much more fulfilling to look through and look at. I really found the video of his interesting because, again, we speculated last week about his knowledge of the hiss. How did he know this was coming? How did he know how to prepare? How did he know what to prepare to protect from the hiss? And it was so interesting because he made, I think I talked about how the hiss or something felt like leaking water, and he used a lifeboat or a life vest analogy about the HRAs, and I was just, that took me back a second. It's like same brain. But yeah, it was really, I still am uncertain, and I'm curious about your theories or sort of what you think about Darling at this point, because we know that Trent didn't trust Darling, and I'm trying to determine whether or not this was because of the internal like politicking of being in a company or a government agency and sort of the paranoia and politicking that comes with it, or was there something more meaningful or deeper behind this paranoia?
Yeah, because like it's in this section that we find a note or something like that from Trench. It's actually as he's talking about the ashtray maze, where he's like, only Darling and his two research assistants, who we now know are Hubert and Carla, have access to this maze, and maybe they shouldn't, is kind of like how he wraps that up. And so there's definitely been a fracture of trust here. The thing that hits me with the Darling recording is he starts talking about HRAs, the device that all the people are wearing. They're like a little speaker system. The H in that is Hedron, Hedron, capital H.
Yes.
And they start talking about Hedron frequencies to combat the hiss frequencies. And like we think of the hiss as like there's some sort of malevolent force or entity that's coming through with this frequency that's like turning people. And you start picking up on Hedron potentially also being an entity of some kind.
Yes, I made a sticky note on my computer because I didn't journal this week because I just wanted to play and just kind of enjoy the wave of writing the story and not writing down. But I wrote down because I was confused if Hedron was a person. Or something. So yeah, that's a really good point. Yep.
And he also mentions in this drunk video, or maybe it's in one of the, I can't remember exactly where I found this, but like there's a note somewhere that there was a data breach last month. And so
I don't think I remember that. Okay, good call.
All of this timing is coming through because about a month ago is when Darling started handing out HRAs and like started saying that something bad is coming. And so we start like really getting a sense for like, it's unclear at this point, like, has someone done something malevolent intentionally, like a human done something malevolent, or has there been some sort of accident or breach in like a firewall kind of thing that is now infecting and coming through? There's just a lot of questions now that I have about like, what are these entities? Who's in control here? What's the bad guy? It's like, there's so many questions and not a lot of answers.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting. There's this sort of underlying question about intentions, and it's interesting to me. It's assumed that the hiss doesn't have an intention. Like the hiss seems to me to be like a virus where it's not malevolent, like it's malevolent in sort of the things that's happening, but at the same time it seems like it is acting because that is the nature of the hiss. I go back and forth, I guess, on it, but the hiss feels more like a virus to me than anything else. Whereas later on, especially with other entities and things, I'm curious about whether or not they are malevolent or not.
Okay, so let's talk about entities, because like as you're exploring Darling's place, you start finding like what looks to be like containment cells where like people were being, stored. You learn about astronauts, who are people who work for the Bureau of Control that like go into the astral plane and like report back. And one of the things we find is a recording that talks about the native species within the astral plane and how one of them like hitched a ride like a brain cloud or an astral spike on one of the astronauts. And you eventually get to one of like what I think is the scariest parts of this game, where there's like almost like an all white cell with this like pixelated cloud moving around that like has this incredibly terse or rough sound design, and like if it gets close to you, it does damage, and you have to like kind of trap it in these hallways so that you can find a tool or something inside this room.
Yeah.
This part scared me the first time I played. It scared me this time I'm playing on God mode, and I'm still scared because it's like, okay, this thing can't kill me, and it's still like my blood pressure is spiking. Like, do you remember this part? Does this resonate with you at all?
And it was the first time too, because we got into the cell because and I knew we had to contain it. And what was interesting was it's the first time you feel this way about something that isn't directly the hiss, which is really interesting. I mostly just I was trying to just shut the doors and just fortunately they don't move fast. So I wasn't scared, but at the same time, it was the first time since maybe first hearing the chanting where their sensory overload was pretty big. And so it was really interesting because I hadn't felt that overwhelmed by the oh my god, what do I do feeling since the chanting, and maybe the first time I tried to run into like the big hiss red area, and then you got the notice that you can't get any closer.
Yep, exactly. For me, it was like really creepy. You start learning more about like this astral plane. Like there's something bigger happening in the astral plane with the board and the upside down pyramid that like we're just starting to get hints of at this point. We do eventually find Marshall, and you don't waste time asking about your brother, and it's clear that Marshall knows something but is not going to tell you until you play ball with her for a little bit. I will say you get to one of the more interesting puzzles of the game with Marshall here, where you get these like punch cards that you have to use to like.
Oh, I loved this puzzle so much.
I loved it. So that one, and there's also like these computers that have like a tesseract or like a cube, and like you can make cubes inside the cube to like unlock certain doors. The combination of these two puzzles I thought was one of the most enjoyable parts. I loved it.
Same. For me, this was sort of the redemption period of the game compared to my start with the hiss cube blocker that I ran into. Yeah, these puzzles were incredible. I loved I did a bunch of side quests before I went and continued my quest with Marshall. And so I did because some of the side quests had the same sort of tesseract, make the same shape with the negative space kind of puzzles with a computer. So much fun. Like my brain loves that kind of thing. And then when we got to collect the cards, and there's the moment where you're looking at the cards and you see the whiteboards. And you're like, okay, here we go. I got to put the cards in the right order. And then I had a moment of how do I know which stand is the right order? And it's just fun because, again, everything is there for you to figure out. You just have to put the pieces together.
It was the perfect amount of like intrigue and frustration for me of like, I'm engaged by this. I know this is solvable. I'm going to figure it out on my own, which there are times when I'm confronted with a puzzle, I'm like, this is not worth the frustration. I'm just going to look it up. But I didn't do that this time. I just really enjoyed working through this puzzle and finding those clues.
Yeah, it was fun. I will say the one thing, Marshall had too many voice lines there. Marshall's like, I think it might be something with the whiteboards. Maybe if we figured out the order of the punch cards. I'm like, I got it. I'm running to do it. Just let me do it.
Agreed. 100% agreed. So through this experience, you unlock and learn about the Black Rock, which is essentially what the Hedron is reacting to produce this protective shield from the hiss. And I will say there's an interesting moment at the Ocean View Hotel around this period where you can hear a couple in real life trying to get into the hotel.
Yes, that was so fun.
I love that.
It was great.
And like, this is where it's like, all I want is to be able to run to that door and yell, where are you? What city are you in?
Yeah.
Like,
oh my gosh.
because we know that like the agent's been looking for this place in real life and these people have stumbled upon it. It's like, oh, this is your one opportunity to find out. And they don't. Too bad. There seems to be some hints in this point, and I didn't write down why I wrote this, that Trench is maybe opposed to Hedron. And it's unclear if it's like opposed to the entity or opposed to the use of the technology, but there's some tension between those things. Did you find that at all?
I did. And I also was a bit confused as to exactly what it meant, but it also, that's what sort of fueled my questions about what is Hedron, what is Hedron's intention,
right?
Like compared to, you know, again, the hiss, Trench, everything. Yeah.
And I there's also, we get a new vocab word at this point in the game, which is thresholds, which is any time that the oldest house is connecting to another dimension, dimensional bleed happens, because we now have to go to the quarry, which to this day is one of the coolest and scariest places that I can think of in video games. Like, when I think about like Elden Ring, you go to like the underworld and there's like there's a starry sky and it's really beautiful. And then the baddies are the same baddies that you would expect to have in an Elden Ring game. In this, the quarry, where you have this like you're underneath, like you're in the basement kind of, and you have the same like a starry sky in front of you.
Yeah.
The quarry is brutal and the baddies are terrifying. So I don't know, like when you made your way to the core, like what were some of the feelings, sensations that you had?
Oh, I loved this mission. I also loved just narratively, each chapter or each mission, I guess, as you end the mission, they always sort of show you a little bit of the environment that you're going to see in the next one. And it's such like, it feels so episodic and it feels so, it's very cinematic or TV show and
That's a great way to
cliffhangery.
say it.
It's wonderful. I love that structure because honestly, it does make me more excited to play the next section. And it also kind of helps recenter me a little bit. So really wonderful structure there. But yeah, this quarry, beautiful. It is scary, but it's so nice because it is the first time we get to see sky. It's the first time we feel this like openness after being in the confines of the hallways and the brutal architecture this whole time. So that was really, really cool. I think more so than the containment center with the first astral spike, the end of this section gave me probably the biggest scare that I've had in this game, which was great.
I think it's the same because there's something about like the freedom of the sky above you, but you have to go down into a quarry where the walls are all really tall and there aren't a lot of exits. And like, it's freaky. Like it just has a really freaky vibe. So for sure.
So yeah, in this section, pretty much you just go down another bunch of waves of enemies to fight. You hook up the batteries, crate things, and you get your special piece of rock to bring back to Marshall. The scariest part, because I was like, yay, we got the rock. And I kind of wanted to just enjoy the space. But immediately the astral spikes, the astral fugues, whatever they're called, they appear and they start coming for you. And that terrified me because I was just like, I don't know where to go. I don't know where I am. And I was so disoriented for a second. So that for me was scary and adrenaline inducing and wonderful.
Yes. So real. So we do get the rock back to Marshall and we get our first insights into what has been happening with Dylan. So they refer to Dylan as P6, the prime candidate. We learn that he was being groomed for becoming the future director, that he also has some sort of talents or power, but that his power somehow changed him. And now he is being kept in containment in the Panopticon, which, did your mind immediately go to the Magnus archives? Because mine certainly did.
Oh my gosh, for the Panopticon?
Mhm.
No, mine actually went to sociology 101 and like
Mhm.
Foucault's Panopticon. So
Yep.
I was just like, oh my gosh. But yes, Magnus Archive was very close. I thought of also just yeah, I this was really cool because we got to see the Panopticon in this cutscene and it looks terrifying. So again,
Yes.
this whole section I thought was just really good in bringing us deeper into the story and just wanting us to know more. And we're going deeper into the bowels of the oldest house, which is cool.
Agreed. We also learned that Marshall needs to go take care of a different item that the Hiss absolutely cannot find. We
Mhm.
still don't know what that is, but it's one more reason that we have to go forge on our own in the My Brother's Keeper section. And go ahead.
Okay, wait, is this the part where Jesse asks Polaris um, if you knew he was here, speaking of Dylan, if you also had contact with him because he was also there when we found you, why didn't you bring me here sooner?
Yes,
That
same
for
part.
me was a huge question because speaking of motivations, I love Polaris. I'm like, Polaris is here helping us, giving us all this,
Yep.
protecting us. Great. I don't think Polaris has it out for us, but I want to know what's in this for Polaris.
I totally agree. Like there are motivations here, and
Mm-hmm.
the the way that we will uncover Dylan, I think, answers some of these questions for me, but certainly not all of them.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's one of the first times that we start questioning that this power that she has believed since she was a child is benevolent and has her best interests at heart and helped fight off these baddies that were trying to do a world incursion. So is something else going on here? Is there an
Yeah.
erosion of trust?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So we do make our way to the containment level, which is where
Mm-hmm.
Dylan is being kept. And story wise, I feel like there's not a ton of like big story beats, but there are a couple really important things that happen in this section.
Mm-hmm.
One, eventually, when you get back to the Oceanfront Hotel, you hear screaming inside one of the rooms.
You see
That
blood
was
on the
freaky.
floor.
Blood on the floor.
Yeah.
And also like the puzzles in that hotel, super, like easy puzzles make tons of sense. I love them. Like, oh, in
Mm-hmm.
this room, it doesn't look like that room. So you move objects, or like now this room's completely upside down and
Yeah.
defying gravity, and what's going on there? Like, I just can't get enough of the hotel. Love it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the hotel is great.
But we also learned the containment center, which, when I first hear that, it makes me think like, oh, there are bad people that are being kept there. And we know Dylan's being kept there.
Mm-hmm.
Is actually not built for people. It is built for objects of power and altered items that require some sort of supervision.
Yeah. And that one unfortunate soul who has to stare at that fridge. Did you? I don't know if you
One
did
of
that
my
side.
absolute I totally forgot about that, and as soon as
Oh
I
my
find it again, I was
god.
like, oh man, I loved this side quest. I actually did complete that side quest, even though it was like right after our stopping point for today's, because I
Mm-hmm.
remembered how it goes. So we get to the Panopticon, we find
Yeah.
like a supervisor there, and it's when you walk in, it's like a giant silo where you have to go floor by floor to clear out Hiss, find your
Mm-hmm.
brother, look at these cool like objects of power along the way that are being kept in these cells. And like Jenny's referencing, one of them is like an old school like 1950s refrigerator, and there's a person screaming for help because his job is to stare at that refrigerator apparently without blinking.
Like,
uh
how is that possible for you?
Makes no sense.
Yeah.
But that is their job, and like you get the option to help them out if you want to. um but eventually on your way, you do get one of your last like main quest storyline powers, which is now we can fly.
Gosh.
Talk to me about like, I would love to hear your unvarnished perspective on what the flight experience has been for you.
I will say I was honestly a little surprised. I was kind of like, oh, I was not expecting this level of like power, I guess. So that was really interesting. But honestly, it's really fun. I feel like now the world has opened up in a way where I get to think like thinking vertically is really fun, especially the Panopticon area because you can honestly just hop up towards levels. You don't have to ride an elevator anymore. That felt really cool.
Mm-hmm.
I had already been finagling and exploring some areas outside of this sector where I had been sort of jumping and dashing down to like just cheat quote
Yep.
to different levels of the map. And so I was like, now I can just fly up and down and save myself the dashing.
Yep.
So it felt honestly really cool. And again, this goes back to this is the Jedi game that I never knew I wanted. I feel like these powers are very fun. Um, and even though the story isn't like the gameplay doesn't change up a ton, it's very cut and dry. Every mission feels very similar structurally, but
Mm-hmm.
it just feels very cool to do all of this stuff with every different power we get. So
Yeah, totally agree. I don't have you unlocked all of the psychic powers at this point? The like the shield, the
yes.
conversion,
Yes. Yeah.
the
I think
yeah.
I have.
Cool.
I went through before, except for like, I didn't do the fridge quest because I couldn't quite figure it out. But I think I've done every other side quest that's been presented so far.
Well, I don't think you can even do the fridge quest until
Oh,
after
okay.
the Dylan thing anyway.
Okay. Cool.
In fact, if you try, I think it says come back to this after
Oh,
talking to Dylan or something. So I think
perfect.
you're well within range here. But I guess like, yeah, let's get to like the end of this section, right? Like we find Dylan cell.
Yeah.
He's not in there. And so many things. So one, we haven't really talked about the fire breaks, but essentially this is what they were building out of the black rock was like
Hmm.
basically little safety areas within the oldest house that would make sure that there could be no incursion. Obviously these have failed for we don't really know why
Right.
yet, but they have failed spectacularly. But one of the fire breaks is in front of Dylan's cell,
Hmm.
and you have to walk through all this like black rock to get there. When you get to Dylan's cell, you see a giant kind of glass. It's a big open room, and in the middle is like a glass container, like Magneto's prison cell.
Yeah.
And there's like black rock things kind of all around. But there's also red lights shining down on it, which all like always represent the hiss.
Hmm.
So I don't I you probably haven't had a ton of time to like bake up deep theories on this, but like what were some of the first things that came to your mind as you're getting into this?
Okay, it was super striking to me that red was the color that essentially we were introduced to Dylan with because yeah, like you mentioned, red is the hiss, red is bad. Um and so I one of the predictions I made for myself was, we came here to find Dylan. I predicted that we would probably find Dylan. I did not predict that I think potentially he's going to be the villain of the story now. Um and I'm really curious to see potentially what relationship he has with the hiss. I One of the questions I was asking myself is if Dylan perhaps is partnered with the hiss the way we are partnered with Polaris, and if that's the case, does that mean the hiss has more sentience than I originally, again, because I had assumed the hiss was more virus like than anything
Hmm.
else. And so this section really started to shake up what I had thought was sort of solid in my understanding of this world. So I'm wondering if, yeah, Dylan and the Hiss are paired in a similar way that we are with a Polaris. Um, Also, I'm like, why are you writing Jesse's name in blood all over?
Yeah.
Like,
Yep.
what is that?
And there's like just a lot of things that the environment makes me curious about. Like
Hmm.
his cell is on tracks. Like it can
Yeah.
go in and out. So it's like, well, what's beyond the cell? There's we talked about kind of the use of BlackRock. There's a recording of Dylan being interviewed by someone who
Mhm.
was some sort of like warden or something, researcher, I don't know. And it's like he's still really positive about Jesse, like sees her, like thinks the world of her, like wishes he could see her, likes her.
Yeah.
And the first thing that we hear is that he has turned himself in
Mhm.
at the executive wing. And this, like, from a geography perspective, opens up questions for me because it's like, obviously, this building's big and moves and whatever, but like, we kind of came here from the executive wing. Like,
Mhm.
we had to unlock a bunch of doors to get to this cell. We never saw him. How is this possible? What's going on
Yeah.
here?
Yeah,
So,
I was wondering that too. I was like, how did we, pass like two ships in the night? How
mhm.
did that happen? Um, Also, I feel like we're making a big enough fuss. Um, and he seems powerful enough. Why didn't he come find us directly?
Mhm.
Why did he? Yeah, and maybe it is just okay. Well, he knows we're eventually going to go back to our sort of home base, but it seems like if he also felt or knew, because I feel like he probably knows more than what we think he knows at this point. I feel like he probably knew she was in the building. He obviously knew she was here. Why didn't he just wait? Because he could have assumed that Jesse was coming for him, and
Yep.
so it's very weird.
Yep.
um
There's
yeah.
one other thing, and I don't remember this happened during this part that we played. So I'm going to just like
Hmm.
say some things and you tell me if this has happened. And if not, I'll save it
Okay.
for next week. But did we have any conversations with the board that indicated that they were dealing with competition?
I'm trying to remember. I don't think so.
Okay, we'll hold off on this then.
Yeah, I
Um,
feel like we've talked about. I think they said more intentionally that the hiss is or something is coming for them specifically, but
yeah.
I don't think we have talked about competition yet. But I could be
Okay.
forgetting.
Well, then I will hold off. But I think like this exploit, we haven't talked a lot about the astral plane itself. There's like a
Hmm.
lot of notes that we picked up in this section of the game about the astral plane. Like someone talks about how there's a city you can see in the distance.
Yeah.
Uh, that it's an actual real place. It's not just somewhere your brain goes off to. Like there's a lot to the astral plane that I'm just like really curious about, and I'll hold off on any more theorizing beyond that for now. But yeah, I feel like this game does a really great job of like teasing you with questions, and like to your point, like
Hmm.
the little cinematic you get at the end of this section before the face of the enemy is just like, what is
Yeah.
happening?
No, yeah, because I think the cinematic we got was that recording where you're like, Dylan's here in the executive off in the boardroom, and,
Hmm.
and I it was really cool because I had to stop because I had to get back to work, but I really did not want to because it was such a good cliffhanger to leave on. So I'm really excited for next week because it'll be our finale episode of Control,
Oh,
which is wild. There's so much content in this game. I cannot believe we squeezed it into 3
look at us
weeks.
go.
Wow. Um, I guess, do you have any, because again, you're the guide this time around because I have not played Control. Like, you are the expert in this game. Any things you wanted to like tease or flag or make sure as we play this last section, like what kind of questions should we be asking ourselves? What kind of things should we pay
Hmm.
attention to as we play?
Uh, I don't remember how this game ends. There is one scene
Fun.
that I have a memory of that we have not played yet,
Uh-huh.
and it's not meaningful to the story. It's just like a really visually and viscerally impactful scene.
Yeah.
But I kind of get to play this last part with like not a
Ew.
lot of memory. So I'm pretty excited for that. But I actually think you have said the thing that's I would absolutely recommend, which is now that you can fly, look up way more because there's a lot more stuff
Mm.
to find now that you can be vertical.
Yeah. Ooh, that's really cool. Yeah, I think one of the things I would like to do is as we play, yeah, make sure I go through any remaining side quests. I really want to figure out the ashtray maze. Um, Also, I actually had a question. I don't know how much you looked at the different objects in the Panopticon, but I was curious if you had a favorite object of power that was held in the Panopticon.
Oh, good question. The like swan thing I think is really interesting.
Yes, the swan boat.
Yes. Um,
Yeah.
for one, it's just like a really interesting thing to see. Like, I love all the objects of power and
Hmm.
the enhanced items, because it's like the idea that like we attach archetypical meaning to something and that gives it power, I just think is a fascinating concept.
Yeah.
But also, this is like a D&D shout out. In a couple of years ago, I DM'd the Wild Beyond the Witchlight,
Hmm.
and in that story there is a swan gondola that you can ride on, and it like wants to hear gossip from you, so it like strongly reminded me of the swandola. And
Yeah.
yeah, so that was kind of it for me. How about you? Was it also the swan?
It was the swan was probably the most eye-catching. I don't think it was in the Panopticon. I think it was maybe a little bit sooner, but there was like a rubber duck that
Mm.
I thought was really funny, and you get a little recording. No, it was just it was right before Dylan Cell. You get a recording where the researcher is trying to sort of like debug this rubber duck and like ask the rubber duck a bunch of questions like quack if you can understand what I'm saying. And that was really fun because as from the dev side of things, I don't know if you've heard of like rubber ducking.
Oh
um,
no.
Basically it's like a way to, what I've been taught at least, is like sort of a way to articulate a problem or sort of work through problems by sort of like speaking it through in the most like basic
Mm.
language possible. And so I think it was just really fun because I was curious if the developers included that partially as a nod to just like a development practice. um,
I love
but
that.
I don't know what debugging, like for me that's what I was taught debugging is. I don't know if it has different meanings or different uses, but um, yeah, I thought that was really fun. So I think the swan
Well,
boat and the rubber duck were my favorites.
since you did bring up the rubber duck, I will say for those who are playing, there is an optional side quest involving the rubber duck. That since we'll be done over this week, and you might not be the person who likes to go back to play. If you're interested in the rubber duck, definitely pursue the rubber duck side quest. It'll be fun.
Yes. Before we wind down, just for a little bit of housekeeping. So next week is our last week with Control. We're going through full spoiler talk through the finale, final reactions, all of that. If you wanted to share your thoughts on Control as we conclude the game, any of your theories that were true, any things that surprised you, please feel free to leave a voicemail or send an email to Jenny at geeksandgrounds.com, or the voicemail link is on our website, geeksandgrounds.com. We can put it in the podcast if you would like, and that way also we can hear more from folks besides us. But also, if you don't want to have your voice on a podcast, go into the Discord, because that is where everyone in the community, or many people, not everyone, but people congregate. We talk about the games together there. For the final week of February, we are doing our first bonus brew podcast. That's really exciting. It's a little bit of a filler moment. It's also something we're trying this year. It's brand new. So it's going through a little bit of like, we're going to see what works, see what doesn't, have fun with each other basically all along the way. The bonus brew, I think I put in, I need to switch on the website. So if you've played the Queen, I think it's Morthel May is how it's pronounced. That will eventually be a bonus brew. It's not wasted time. It's also only 20 minutes, but we're actually playing the Blueprints demo for the last week of January. So what's exciting is we're going to have a guest join us. Bonus brews hopefully will be our time to bring in guests on the podcast, friends of the show, friends of the community. And for folks who know Intelligame and the wonderful Josh Boykin, he will be coming onto
Hey.
the show to talk about the Blueprints demo. I'm really excited. love Josh dearly. I'm super, super pumped to hear what he thinks of this. And the demo is on Steam. It's free. So if you would like to play it, maybe share your thoughts on the demo in the Discord, or again, for that last week of the month, feel free and go ahead and do that. I think, and the last thing, Geeks and Grounds Hangout for Control is on January 25th at 3 p.m. Pacific time in the Discord. But all of
Come
this will be in
hang
the
out with
newsletter.
us.
Yeah, come hang out. It will be really fun. We had such a fun end of the year hangout talking about Deltarune. If you're new, even if it's to pop in and just say hi, you don't have to stay the whole time. But it's a great chance to just spend a little time in community with folks who are also in Geeks and Grounds.
Lurkers also welcome. So if you just want to listen in and hear what's going on, feel free to join.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us this week at Geeks and Grounds. It's a pleasure to have you here as always. And if the voice in your head brings you to a strange building, maybe ask it some questions first before going in. I don't know.
See y'all next time.
Bye.
Bye.